What's good, ladies and gents? Welcome back to MKO Boxing, aka MKO Pugilism, where we talk all things boxing. Do remember to like and subscribe on YouTube, follow on TikTok, all that good stuff to the channel. So let's get into this one. So earlier in the week, I want to say, 2 days ago by now, we had this big news that we're having Turki Alalsheikh, a guy called Nick Khan, who I've not really heard about him before, but he's the president of the WWE. He's the one that's owning that and headlined that. And Turki Al-Sheikh and Dana White. So these guys are all going to come together as a powerhouse. And the name of another company that I believe is headed by Nick Khan is TKO. TKO is going to be this. It's a boxing company, and basically what they're going to do. These three powerhouses of you got the power of the WWE, Dana White of UFC, and Turki Al-Sheikh. We know His Excellency. He's really changed a lot in boxing over, and he's only been in it for about 18 months. I mean, he's been able to put some mega fights on. We had the 5 versus 5 with Matchroom versus Queensbury, massive Wembley Stadium fights, undisputed light heavyweight fight. So this guy has really come in and really sort of just, he's even managed to make Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn and Oscar De La Hoya, all these guys, he managed to make everyone work together. He's managed to make the biggest and the best fights possible by showing, and give the biggest paydays possible. So Turki Al-Sheikh, he's really shook up the game, and now he's chosen Dana White of UFC fame and this Nick Khan. They're all going to work together. So you got the powerhouses there, WWE, UFC, and Turki Al-Sheikh. And I'm just going to speak about a few of the pros and the cons of this proposed boxing league that these guys are all going to come together and collaborate on. And here we go. I'll just talk about, first of all, the pros. I want to say one pro for this, one positive thing we can take from this is the structure, because any fighter that's in this structure, and I take it out, in my opinion, from what I've heard, it seems to be fighters sort of at the beginning of their career. So the structure is gonna allow the best fights to be taking place and the best possible fights among whoever's in there, because they're gonna have a structure, a league system, and points and everything. So is the structure of this whole thing is gonna make it easy to digest, easy to sort of understand who's the best, and easy for the best to fight the best, because there's going to be a demand. As I said already, it's going to be easy now to tell who's the best in any given division, because you're going to have a ranking system. It's all going to be, from what they're saying, from what Dana White and them are saying, it's going to be all merit based. All the guys fight each other, and then you'll have one top guy who's proved himself, who's beaten everyone he needs to beat, and he is at the top for a reason. So you're going to have that structure. You're going to get the best possible fights, and it's not going to be like kind of the wild west with the sport of boxing in general, where there's a lot of independence there. It's going to be a case of, no, you're fighting him and you're fighting him, and there's going to be a czar or a top guy there like Dana White, who's just going to be, it's just going to be dictated who's fighting who. So that is going to lend itself to some structure there. So at least we know in this TKO thing, it's going to be structured, and the best possible fights are going to happen, because guys are going to be made to fight each other. Climbing the ranks seems to be, will probably be straightforward. You just keep fighting and fighting until you get to the top. I don't know what the structure of it's all going to be. And I think one of the pros of this also is going to be that it will be brilliant for fighters who are not so well known. It will be good for fighters that they may have the talent, but they might not be able to sell a ticket. They might not be the most marketable fighter, but if they can jump onto this structure, it will allow them to build up a fan base, because these things, when Turki Al-Sheikh and these WWE, these guys, they do things in a big way. So even if you're an unknown fighter, but you jump into this, you can be on big cards, you can be in front of a lot of eyes and stuff because of the brand and because of the notoriety. So it'll be great for guys that are not so well known and maybe they can't sell tickets, because they can jump onto this and get seen by millions of people, presumably. And another positive thing is this structure, this system, because of the notoriety and the fame of Dana White and the WWE and their expertise in marketing, this may actually create, some years down the line, it might actually create an organic star who comes from this TKO promotions and wins the belt and crosses over and people get to know them. So it might actually create a star. We don't know, we'll have to see. Another positive thing is that it will attract possibly the crossover fans, so it may attract people that wouldn't normally watch boxing, but they'll watch UFC or they'll watch WWE, and you might get that crossover where, because of the names involved, like a Dana White, like Nick Khan and Turki, you might get that crossover where you'll get UFC fans interested in this particular TKO thing, because obviously the head of the UFC is at the helm here. So you might get that crossover, maybe even WWE fans might be interested in a bit of boxing or might just be curious. So you may get that crossover of fan bases. You could also have the thing where they might actually do crossover shows where you get a show where there's a bit of boxing, there's a bit of UFC, there's a bit of WWE or whatever, or maybe it's just boxing and UFC, where they may have a cage come down from the ceiling or a ring come down from the ceiling, or 1 minute is boxing, next minute is something, you mixed martial arts. I think that crossover thing could be a positive where we'll, and we know how the Saudis do it. They do things big. So you could have that crossover where you even see shows where there's different sports involved. That could be a thing. Anyway, as far as the cons go, the few that I've thought about are the idea of Dana White, because Dana White, obviously, he's a successful businessman, but he does have a history of having a structure, and he still has this structure in the UFC where there's no real sort of independence for the fighters. There's no fighter that really becomes bigger than the brand. Even guys like Conor McGregor, because of the structure of the UFC where the company takes the majority of the money and the fighter only gets a very small percentage. That's why you see a lot of UFC guys going outside the brand, guys like John Jones wanting to do other things and sort of complaining, Francis Ngannou. It's all because in their structure, I believe their UFC takes around 75% of whatever the show proceeds are, and then the fighters, and whatever, only working with that 25%, and then it's whatever of that 25%. So whereas something like boxing, it can be around 50% that goes to the promotional company, and then the other 50% will be split amongst the fighters and whatever and pay them that way. So in boxing, there's that bigger pot where you can make more money, but the UFC model kind of makes it so that the fighter has very little money in comparison to what they could make if they were boxers. So you've got that history of a structure which makes it hard for the fighter to make a lot of money and makes sure that the fighter is kind of underpaid in a way. So Dana White has got that kind of history of kind of underpaying the fighter. So that could be a hindrance. He might influence Turki, Alalsheikh, to say, yo, listen, you're paying these guys how many million? Let's pay these guys less. So that could be a negative there, a con of it. There's that possible influence. And, as I've said, with the UFC structure, there's not really the transparency for the fighter where they can be independent and make their own money, where they can see what the show is making and negotiate and do audits, financial audits. Is very much just kind of shut up and do what you're told. That's kind of how the UFC model is. So that could be a negative, that maybe he'll just grab hold of this thing and influence it and be like, listen, you guys just shut up and fight and do what you're told, and it might not give that opportunity for independence and for that fighter to be business savvy, like a Sugar Ray Leonard who done fight by fight from when he come out of the Olympics, like a Floyd Mayweather who bought himself out of his contract. that might not be a possibility in this structure. It might just be like very controlled to where you're not really getting your independence and your opportunity to become a transcendent star like an Ali, Mayweather, even McGregor. So okay, that's another thing. Another thing that could be a con or problem in this is that this company, this TKO thing, I know there's talk of it having its own belt, and it could become insular to the point where what they do is they talk up themselves as a brand and use their little brand as an independent thing that does not mix and does not do business with other organizations, and all they do is care about their TKO belt. They don't deal with the WBC, WBA, IBF, WBO. They might just keep it insular and keep all the fights in-house and never mix with the outside world, much like what happens in the UFC, where you'll never hear the UFC fight, guys going to Pride or going to Bellator or whatever. It's very much just in-house, and everything else outside is irrelevant. So that insular thing could be another con where I don't know this, but that's just my thought on it. And refusing to work with people, refusing to work with although now Eddie Hearn and Frank working together, but they could say, listen, when the company makes it to a certain point, it's TKO only. We're not working with you guys. We're done with you guys. We're done with these belts, and it's all about our belt and our thing in-house. And that could be another con. Now, just lastly, I'll say that what could be a con on this, what could be a negative, is that they might be able to kind of buy most of the promoters out and kind of have a monopoly on boxing, which would be a negative, because in boxing, one thing that's a benefit, it may be corrupt in some ways, it may have a lot of problems, and we've had years where the best ain't been fighting the best, but it's still the wild, wild west, and it's still a place where if you're business savvy, you can make a lot of money in it. So if these guys come in, this TKO thing, and just kind of monopolize the whole thing, and sort of do away with competition and make it just they're the only game in town, I think that's a negative thing, because I cite the example of, let's say, Frank Warren. Now, there was a time when Eddie Hearn was kind of unknown, just Barry Hearn's son, and doing a prize fighter thing and, doing things small. And then one day he blew up. With Anthony Joshua, built him as a star from the ground up. And Frank Warren was, and Frank Maloney were kicked off of Sky, and it was only Eddie Hearn, the only promoter. But then in recent years, Frank Warren persisted and kept on. And now Frank Warren has taken over from Eddie Hearn, and he's now the man in the spotlight. He's now the man with all the top heavyweights in the heavyweight division. So because of the structure of boxing, because of the way it is a wild west, and it's about persistence and competition and, beating the other guy. So because of the independence and the structure of boxing, where you do have the allowance for competition for different companies to come together, and one company to beat the other this year and the next year it change. Because of that structure, that competition allows people to rise and fall and all this. Whereas if you got a monopoly, it kind of eliminates the competition and makes it, you've just got to go to this one league and this one guy. And I think for me, it's always good to have competition business-wise in boxing. So that's just my thoughts on this whole thing. Let me know yours in the comment section. Until next time, it's MKO Boxing, over and out.